Finally home.
Where is everyone?
Oh, Your Majesty, please. Stay silent.
The king arrives at dawn. Prepare the ambush.
They want you dead.
Prologue. Alpha King Camden Floyd was a wolf who commanded the Palm Grove territories with unshakable authority. He had enemy packs surrendering at his approach and ancient dynasties seeking his alliance. But the one thing he didn't have was a clue that his own assassination had been orchestrated for this very night, inside his own palace walls. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was supposed to be at the northern battlefront for another 3 days. But when the crimson-cloaked king walked through the moonlit entrance 2 days early, the wrongness hit him like a physical blow. He expected the grand welcome of his court, the warmth of hearth fires, the bustle of evening rituals. Instead, he found Sarai Boyd, the quiet Omega maid with golden hair and amber eyes, standing in the shadowed corridor like a specter. She didn't bow, and she didn't speak. She pressed a single trembling finger to her lips, tears streaming down her pale face, and whispered 2 words that would save his life and destroy his world. Stay silent. What Camden discovered in the moments that followed didn't just break his heart. It obliterated everything he thought he knew about loyalty, love, and power. Before we journey deeper into Camden's story, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button. This story gets darker, more twisted, and more shocking with every chapter, and you don't want to miss what happens next. Subscribe now and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now, let's continue into the darkness. The dust of war didn't wash off easily, not from armor, not from conscience. Camden Floyd had learned that truth in 100 battlefields across a decade of conquest. But tonight, as he rode through the eastern gates of his palace fortress, all he wanted was to forget the stench of blood and the screams of dying men. The campaign against the Blackwood rebels was supposed to take 5 days minimum, but their leader had been betrayed by his own lieutenant within hours of Camden's arrival. A brutal coup that ended the conflict before it truly began. Disgusted by the senseless violence and bone-weary from months of endless warfare, Camden had mounted his warhorse and ridden south immediately, leaving General Thorne to oversee the treaty negotiations. He wanted the one thing his crown rarely granted him: rest. His horse's hooves echoed against the marble courtyard as the towering palace came into view. At the iron braziers along the walls should have been blazing with welcome fires. The guards should have called out his arrival. Musicians should have struck up the royal anthem. Instead, darkness, silence, emptiness. The palace loomed ahead, a fortress of white stone and golden spires. But tonight it felt like a mausoleum. Every window was dark, every corridor silent. Camden guided his horse around the western wing, avoiding the main entrance. He wanted to surprise Queen Everly. They had argued bitterly before his departure, about his constant absence, about the future of their bloodline, about the growing distance between them. He had claimed a rare moonstone pendant from the Blackwood treasure, a peace offering wrapped in velvet. He touched the small pouch at his belt as he dismounted near the servants' entrance. At this private gate was known only to him and the head of household staff, a secret passage for moments when the king wanted to move unseen through his own home. The massive oak door swung inward without sound. Camden paid the master craftsman a small fortune to maintain every hinge in this palace monthly. He stepped into the stone corridor, shaking road dust from his crimson cloak. The smell of the palace enveloped him, cold marble, cedar smoke, and the faint herbal scent of the lavender soap the Omega staff used on the floors. He moved through the servants' kitchen, empty. The massive hearth was cold, no evening meal being prepared. He frowned. Where was Martha, the head cook? Where were the night staff rotating through their duties? Where were the palace guards who should be patrolling these lower halls? A predatory instinct crawled up Camden's spine. The same feeling he'd had in the Ravenclaw ambush 3 years ago. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was waiting, hunting. Camden loosened his leather sword belt, his hand instinctively moving to the hilt of the blade at his hip. He moved soundlessly through the corridor, his battle-trained reflexes taking over as he approached the grand staircase leading to the royal chambers. He turned the corner toward the main hall and stopped cold. A figure stood motionless in the shadows beneath the marble archway, backlit by pale moonlight filtering through the stained glass windows. Camden's hand snapped to his sword, drawing 6 inches of steel in a blur of deadly precision. "Don't move," he commanded, his alpha voice reverberating through the empty space with barely restrained violence. Yet the figure gasped, a sharp feminine sound of pure terror. She stumbled forward into the sliver of moonlight, and Camden recognized her immediately, Sarai Boyd, the Omega Maid. She was young, perhaps 23, with golden hair pulled into a disheveled braid and amber eyes that seemed impossibly large in her pale, tear-stained face. She wore the simple gray servant's dress that hung loose on her slender frame. She was clutching a bundle of cleaning linens like a shield, her knuckles bone-white with fear. Camden lowered the sword slightly but didn't sheath it. He knew every soul who worked in his palace. Though Sarai was relatively new, hired perhaps 6 months ago, she was quiet, efficient, and usually invisible in the way Omegas learned to be in royal courts. "Sarai," Camden said, at his voice a low rumble that carried authority even in whisper. "Where is everyone? Why are the fires cold? Where is my court?" Sarai didn't answer immediately. Her eyes darted from his face to the top of the grand staircase, then back to him, frantic and desperate. She was trembling so violently he could hear the soft rustle of fabric against fabric. "My king," she breathed, her voice barely audible, cracking with emotion. You're supposed to be at the northern front." "The campaign plans changed," Camden said, taking a step closer. "The war ended early. Now answer my question. Where is Queen Everly? Where are my guards?" Sarai's amber eyes went impossibly wider, filling with tears that spilled down her cheeks. She abandoned all protocol, all hierarchy, all sense of station. She rushed forward with surprising speed, her cold hand grabbing the leather strap across his chest, pulling him forcefully into the alcove beneath the grand staircase. "Hey," Camden began, his alpha dominance flaring at the uninvited touch. "Shh," Sarai hissed, the sound sharp as a dagger. She looked absolutely terrified, her entire body shaking with an emotion beyond fear, beyond panic. She pressed a trembling finger to her lips, tears streaming freely now, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. "Please, Your Majesty," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Not a word, not a sound. Stay silent." Camden's annoyance warred with his warrior's instincts. He was the Alpha King. No one silenced him. No one commanded him to hide in the shadows of his own palace. But the raw terror radiating from this Omega wasn't performance. That this wasn't anxiety about court protocol or fear of punishment. This was the fear of death. "Why?" he demanded in a whisper, leaning close, his hand still gripping his sword hilt. "Speak quickly, girl. What's happening in my home?" Sarai pointed a shaking finger upward, toward the ceiling, toward the king's tower where the royal chambers resided, where his wife should be sleeping peacefully. "Because," she whispered, her voice cracking with grief and terror, "they are celebrating your funeral, Your Majesty. And if they hear you now, they'll make sure you have one by dawn." The words struck Camden like a war axe to the chest. His own execution, his own funeral, his own death, scheduled, planned, celebrated, and he had walked straight into the trap. His blood turned to ice. Yet his battle-hardened mind immediately shifted into tactical survival mode. The celebration of his death didn't make sense, not yet. But every instinct honed over a decade of warfare screamed one undeniable truth. He was the only person in this palace who didn't know he was supposed to be dead. And the clock was ticking. Listen to me carefully. If you made it this far, you're not a casual listener. You're invested. You need to know what happens when Camden confronts Everly. You need to see Sarai's true identity revealed. You need to witness the moment the invisible maid becomes a queen. So here's what you're going to do right now. Subscribe. Hit that button like your entertainment depends on it, because it does. Then share this story with someone who loves epic betrayals and shocking twists. Mas, drop a comment with your prediction. Does Camden forgive Everly, or does he destroy her? I'm watching the comments, and the best theories get featured in the next episode. Don't just consume content. Be part of this community. Subscribe, share, comment. Now, the throne is waiting, And so is the next chapter. Chapter 1. The shattered mirror. Camden's breathing was controlled, measured, but his heart hammered against his ribs. Sarai's trembling hand still gripped his armor, her amber eyes locked on his with terrified intensity. "They're celebrating my funeral," Camden repeated, testing the words. They didn't make more sense spoken aloud. Before Sarai could explain, heavy boots echoed from above, multiple sets, descending the grand staircase. Camden's hand tightened on his sword hilt, and every instinct screaming at him to step into the open and demand answers. But Sarai's grip on his armor tightened, and she shook her head violently, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. She pointed frantically toward deeper shadows, pressing both hands over her mouth. The voices grew louder. "Sweep the eastern wing again. If the king deviated from the northern route, he could arrive by midnight." General Marcus Thorne, Camden's second-in-command, the man he'd trusted for 8 years. "The king would never travel alone," a younger voice replied. "His arrogance will be his undoing, or rather, it already has been," Thorne sneered. "We simply need to ensure the final act is executed cleanly. Has the queen confirmed the timeline?" "Her Majesty has confirmed everything. By dawn, the king will be dead. Lord Varric installed as prince consort, and the age of Floyd will be over." The words hit like a war hammer to the chest. His wife, his general, his entire court, all celebrating his death while he'd been riding home with a moonstone pendant for reconciliation. What a fool he'd been. The boots moved past, descending toward the lower halls. If the king arrives, he dies before he reaches the throne room. Her Majesty was clear, no witnesses, no theatrics. When the footsteps faded, Sarai slowly released Camden's wrist. She was shaking so badly she could barely stand. "The throne room," Camden whispered, his voice raw. "My wife is there?" Sarai nodded, not trusting her voice. "Take me." "Your Majesty, if they see you, they won't see me. You know this palace better than I do. The passages, the hidden routes. And that's how you knew to wait here." Sarai's amber eyes widened, revealing a flicker of sharp intelligence quickly hidden beneath Omega deference. "I clean the royal chambers. I see things, hear things." "Then prove it. Get me to the throne room without being seen." She hesitated, then nodded once and moved deeper into the alcove. She pressed her palm against solid stone, and a section shifted, revealing a narrow passage. "The palace has dozens of these," Sarai whispered, lighting a small lamp. "Built during the Age of Rebellion, most have been sealed, but servants still use a few." They moved through claustrophobic darkness, the passage twisting through the palace's interior walls. Sarai navigated with absolute confidence, never hesitating. Finally, she stopped at a section where golden light seeped through gaps in the stone. "At the throne room, this ventilation shaft carries sound. If we're quiet, we can hear everything." Camden pressed his eye against a narrow gap. His throne room was ablaze with candlelight, filled with familiar faces. Lord Ashford, Lady Millicent, Captain Royce, all dressed formally, holding crystal goblets, their faces flushed with celebration. And at the center, in midnight blue silk, stood Queen Everly. She was laughing, her hand possessively on Lord Varric's arm. He wore black and silver, palm groove colors, with a golden circlet like a crown. "My friends," Everly's voice rang out. "Tonight, we stand at the threshold of a new age. For too long, we've been ruled by a king whose only talents are violence and conquest. Camden Floyd has bled our coffers dry in pursuit of his own glory, but no more. Tonight, the old order dies." "Here! Here!" The crowd erupted in approval. Varric stepped forward, his hand moving to Everly's back with intimate familiarity. "When Camden Floyd falls at dawn, I will rule with the wisdom and strategic brilliance that has been so lacking. Together, we will usher in an era of prosperity." "What of the king's loyalists?" Duchess Helena called out. "They will be dealt with," Varric said simply. "General Thorne has compiled a list. Those who bend the knee will keep their titles. Those who resist will be eliminated." "And the body?" Lord Ashford asked nervously. Everly's smile was cold. "The king will be found in his chambers at dawn, victim of a tragic accident. The details will be managed. Camden Floyd will be mourned with appropriate ceremony and then forgotten. History will remember him as a warrior who died violently and alone." The room erupted in cruel laughter. Camden watched his wife embrace Varric openly, watched the court he'd built raise their glasses to his death as if it were a holiday. He'd been blind, worse than blind. He'd trusted these people with everything while they plotted his murder. Everly turned toward the throne, running her hand along the armrest. There were times I thought we'd never reach this moment. Camden can be remarkably difficult to kill. Fortunate he's also remarkably predictable, Varric replied. You knew he'd return early. You knew he'd use the eastern entrance. You knew he'd be alone, exhausted, vulnerable. My soon-to-be former husband, Everly corrected with a smile. The man is already dead. Yet we're simply waiting for his body to realize it. More laughter, more toasts, more celebration of treason. Camden felt something fundamental break inside him. Not his heart, that had been dying in this marriage for years. It was his faith, his belief in the loyalty he'd earned, the kingdom he'd built with blood and sacrifice. All of it was a lie. Your Majesty, please, Sarai urged, tugging at his arm. We can't stay here. Camden took one last look. Everly was kissing Varric now, shameless, her hands in his hair. The court cheered them on. He committed every face to memory, every traitor, every person who thought they could build their new world on his grave. They were wrong. Camden Floyd had survived 100 battlefields. He'd been caught off guard, true, but he was still breathing, still armed, still dangerous. And now he was no longer bound by laws or mercy. He followed Sarai back into the passage, pulling the viewing slot closed. Darkness swallowed them, but Camden welcomed it. Darkness was where predators thrived. Darkness was where wolves hunted, and the hunt had just begun. Chapter 2: The Maid's Secret Path. The passage led them down, deep into the palace's belly. Camden followed Sarai through the claustrophobic darkness, his mind still reeling from what he'd witnessed. Every face he'd trusted, every advisor he'd promoted, all of them celebrating his execution like it was a festival. They emerged in a root cellar 2 floors below the servants' quarters. Massive barrels lined the walls, dried herbs hung from the ceiling. A single lantern burned on a work table. We're safe here, Sarai said, her voice shaking. The steward only checks once a week. Camden braced his hands against the table, letting his head drop forward. The weight of betrayal crashed down on him. How long have you known? Sarai moved to a barrel and pulled out a small leather journal. 3 months. That's when Queen Everly dismissed her usual maids and requested me specifically. She wanted someone quieter. Camden opened the journal, page after page of cramped handwriting, dates, times, names, observations. June 3rd, Lord Varric arrived at midnight. Meeting with Queen lasted until dawn. June 15th, General Thorne attended secret meeting, discussion of loyal officers and necessary removals. You've been documenting their conspiracy, Camden said, looking up. Who are you really? Sarai pulled out a wooden box containing folded letters, correspondence between Everly and Varric dating back a year. Camden unfolded one at random. My dearest Varric, the campaign will keep him away for 2 months. I grow weary of this charade. When this is finished, I will never again smile while my heart screams for freedom. Soon we will have everything we've planned. Camden's hands shook. She never loved me. I don't know if she did or didn't, Sarai said quietly, but she's been planning this for at least a year. Who are you? Sarai met his gaze steadily. I worked for a group called the Ghost Scribes. We documented movements of power, tracked conspiracies. We were sent here because of rumors about instability in your court. Spies. Historians. That we collected information and warned innocent people about threats. She paused. My real name is Sarai Boyd. Camden's blood went cold. The Boyd Purge. 8 years ago, Varric accused your family of sedition. All fabricated. My family's only crime was controlling river crossings Varric wanted. So he manufactured treason charges and you signed the execution order. No accusation in her voice, just fact. My parents, my brothers, my little sister, all dead. I was 16, away when his soldiers came. Gods, Camden breathed. If I'd known the evidence was false, would you have done anything differently? You were fighting 3 wars, signing dozens of documents daily, trusting your advisors. Sarai's voice was hollow. I hated you for years. When the scribes assigned me here, I volunteered. I wanted proof of your tyranny. Instead, I found you're just a man who made mistakes. A flawed leader, not a monster. After watching Everly and Varric's casual cruelty, I understood the difference. So you warned me. even though I signed your family's death warrant. Because I've seen what Varric does with power. Letting you die wouldn't bring back my family. It would just give him everything he wanted. A distant sound, baying hounds, both tensed. They've realized you're here, Sarai said. We need to leave, now. Where? I have a plan. We get you out of the palace entirely, the Blackwood territories, the rebels you just made peace with. If Varric takes your throne, he won't honor your treaty, but if you offer them a true alliance, they'd help you reclaim your crown. That could take days to reach, by then, which is why we leave tonight. Bet we use the tunnels to reach the stables, take horses, ride for the border. Sarai's amber eyes blazed with determination. We have maybe 6 hours before dawn. It was reckless, desperate, their only option. The stables will be guarded. The main stables, yes, but there's a smaller one behind the kennels, hunting horses. We can take them. Camden studied her. You know a lot about this palace's operations for a maid who's been here 6 months. I'm very good at my job, Your Majesty. Something in how she said it made Camden wonder what her job actually was. But that was a question for later. All right, we do it your way, but I need weapons first. They moved back into the passages, Camden taking the lead this time. He knew these walls from childhood, secret places where princes hid from responsibilities, and he led them to the East Tower Armory, picked the lock, selected a longsword and weapons for Sarai, then toward the kennels. They crept through the kennelmaster's quarters while he slept, slipped outside into the courtyard. 2 guards patrolled, talking quietly. Think the king will actually show up tonight? After dawn, we serve Lord Varric. Camden's jaw clenched. Even the common guards had turned. They reached the small stable, 4 hunting horses. Camden began saddling one, helped Sarai with hers. The stable door burst open. General Marcus Thorne stood there, sword drawn, 6 guards behind him. Your Majesty, you're a hard man to kill. Camden pushed Sarai behind him and drew his sword. Not as hard as you're about to discover. He launched forward. Steel met steel. But the narrow stable worked in his favor. They couldn't all attack at once. Camden fought with fury and skill, but there were too many. Sarai grabbed a pitchfork and drove it into a guard's back. The man screamed, but more guards were coming. They were going to die here. Run, Camden shouted at Sarai. Take the horse and ride. No, I'm not leaving you. Camden threw her onto the saddled horse. That's an order. He slapped the horse's flank hard. It bolted out with Sarai clinging desperately to the saddle. Camden turned to face Thorne and the remaining guards, his sword raised. You can't win, Camden, Thorne said. Everything you built is ashes. Then let it burn, but I'm taking you with me. Camden attacked with everything he had. He cut down guards, his sword moving in deadly patterns. But legends bleed. And another blade entered his side. He stumbled. Thorne moved in for the kill. Hoofbeats, loud, fast. Sarai burst back into the stable on her horse, riding straight at the guards. As she passed Camden, she extended her hand. Jump! Camden grabbed her hand and leaped. His weight nearly pulled them both down, but Sarai held on. He swung himself up behind her. They rode out at full gallop. Behind them, Thorne shouted orders, but they were already across the courtyard, through a forgotten maintenance gate, into the forest. Sarai rode like she'd been born on horseback. Behind them, the palace came alive with bells and horns. The hunt had begun. Camden pressed his face against Sarai's back, feeling her warmth, her steady breathing. This nobody, this Omega maid, she'd saved his life twice in one night. Thank you, he whispered. And she reached back and squeezed his hand. We're not done yet. This is only the beginning. They rode east, toward the rising sun and unknown territories beyond. Behind them, Camden's kingdom burned in betrayal. Ahead lay only questions, dangers, and slim hope. But hope, Camden was learning, was sometimes enough, at least for one more dawn. Chapter 3. Blood and snow, the horse was dying beneath them. Camden felt it in the animal's labored breathing, in the way its gait had shifted from powerful gallops to desperate stumbling. They'd been riding for 6 hours since escaping the palace, pushing east through dense forest as dawn broke cold and gray over the mountains. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit never stopped. Horns, hounds, the distant shouts of men who would not give up. We need to stop, Camden said, his voice rough. Yet his wounds from the stable fight had reopened. He could feel blood seeping through Sarai's makeshift bandages, warm and sticky. His shoulder burned with every movement. Not yet, Sarai replied without turning. There's a hunter's shelter my father used. 2 more miles. 2 miles might as well have been 200. Camden's vision was starting to blur at the edges. He'd lost too much blood. The cold wasn't helping. They'd climbed into the foothills where patches of old snow still clung to the rocks, despite summer approaching. A horn sounded, closer now, too close. Sarai urged the horse faster, but the animal had nothing left to give. They were moving at barely a trot, scrambling up loose shale toward a cliff face. Camden could barely see through the fog of exhaustion and pain. There, Sarai said suddenly, pointing. It carved into the rock was a structure so well camouflaged, Camden would have missed it. Stones stacked to blend with natural rock. A moss-covered roof, a weathered pine door. They reached it as the horse finally gave out, collapsing to its knees. Sarai pulled Camden from the saddle. He tried to walk, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. She half-dragged him inside, his blood leaving a trail on the stone floor. "Stay with me," she commanded, slapping his face when his eyes started to close. "Don't you dare pass out." But passing out seemed wonderful, better than the fire in his shoulder, the agony in his side, the cold seeping into his bones. "Camden," Sarai's voice cut through the fog. "Open your eyes." He managed to crack them open. She'd removed his shirt and was examining his wounds with shaking hands. "Yet the shoulder wound has gone septic," she muttered. "You've lost too much blood. She stopped herself, took a breath. "I need to work with what I have." She got a fire going in the old hearth, then disappeared outside. Camden tried to protest. The hunters, they'd find her, but she was already gone. She returned minutes later with arms full of plants. "My grandmother was a healer," Sarai said, crushing the plants in a rusted pot with water. "Before the purge, she taught me which plants help and which ones kill. Said every woman should know how to save a life and take one." "Practical woman," Camden whispered. She survived 3 wars and 5 alpha regimes. Practicality was survival. Sarai heated the mixture over the fire. "This is going to hurt. I need to clean out the infection, then cauterize the wounds." She didn't wait for permission. She used a worn knife to cut away his bandages, then began cleaning the wounds with brutal efficiency. Camden bit down on leather she'd given him, his body going rigid with agony. "My grandmother was the first one Varric killed," Sarai said, her voice deliberately calm, giving him something to focus on. "She saw him coming months before, warned my father, warned everyone. But no one believed her. They thought she was old, seeing threats where none existed. She cleaned each wound thoroughly, applied the hot herbal mixture. Camden nearly blacked out from the burning. She knew exactly how it would happen, told me the night before that I should be elsewhere, arranged for me to attend that diplomatic function. She saved my life by sending me away. And I never got to thank her." Camden reached up with his good hand and caught her wrist. "She knew you'd survive. That's why she sent you away. You were her legacy." Sarai's eyes glistened, but she blinked back tears and began stitching with fishing lines she'd found in the shelter. Maybe she just wanted one of us to live long enough to see Varric pay. She finished the stitches, then heated the knife in the fire until it glowed red. Now the hard part. She pressed it against the wounds. Camden screamed into the leather as she cauterized each one, the smell of burning flesh filling the shelter. When she finally finished, Camden lay gasping and shaking. Sarai sat back, her own hands trembling. "That should hold. If infection doesn't set in again, if you can rest 12 hours, if we can keep you warm." At a lot of ifs. "Story of our lives," Camden managed. Outside, darkness was falling. Through the window, Camden could see stars appearing. The temperature dropped rapidly. Sarai added wood to the fire, produced dried meat and bread from their packs. She made Camden eat, made him drink melted snow. "Dehydration will kill you as surely as infection," my grandmother's second lesson. After they'd eaten, Sarai wrapped herself in Camden's cloak and settled near the fire. She was still shivering despite the heavy fabric. "Tell me about the ghost scribes," Camden said. "What was it like? Lonely, constantly living a lie, watching over your shoulder. You couldn't trust anyone, couldn't form real relationships. Everyone was either a target or a threat." She pulled the cloak tighter. "We'd meet maybe twice a year for training. Those were the only times I felt like myself. The only times I could be Sarai Boyd instead of whoever I was pretending to be." "What happened to them? You said the organization no longer exists." Sarai's expression darkened. Varric found out about us 6 months ago, sent assassins to our safe houses. Most were killed in a single night. A few escaped, scattered, went into deep cover. I took the palace assignment because it was the best hiding place, invisible in plain sight in the very palace where Varric visited. A sound outside made them both freeze. The crunch of footsteps on snow, multiple sets. Sarai moved to the window, peered out carefully. Her face went pale. They found us. At least a dozen men. They're surrounding the shelter. Camden tried to stand, but his body wouldn't cooperate. The wounds, the blood loss. At the exhaustion, it had finally caught up. There's a back way out, Sarai said quickly, moving to the rear wall. Hidden passage my father showed me. Leads down the mountain through caves. I can't walk. Then I'll carry you. She pulled him upright, supporting his weight. My grandmother also taught me that survival is about doing impossible things because the alternative is death. Outside, a voice called out. We know you're in there. Come out peacefully and the king will die quickly. We'll even let the girl live. They're lying, Sarai whispered, pressing on a stone that swung inward, revealing darkness. They'll kill us both. Then let's not give them the chance, Camden said, finding strength he didn't know he had left. They slipped through the opening into a narrow passage that angled down into the mountain. Behind them, they heard the shelter door crash open, heard shouts of anger when they found the space empty. Find them! They can't have gone far. But Sarai was already leading Camden deeper into the darkness, following passages she remembered from childhood, staying one step ahead of death. For now. Chapter 4, The Unlikely Ally. 3 days. That's how long it took them to reach the Blackwood territories, traveling through caves and wilderness, staying ahead of Varric's hunters by pure determination and Sarai's intimate knowledge of the mountain passages. 3 days of Camden barely conscious, his wounds fighting infection, his body sustained only by Sarai's healing knowledge and stubborn will. Now they stood at the edge of a clearing where Blackwood sentries watched them with crossbows raised and suspicion in their eyes. State your business, the lead sentry demanded. He was young, scarred, wearing the black and green of the Blackwood pack. These are neutral territories. Trespassers are executed. Camden stepped forward, swaying slightly. His crimson regalia was torn and blood-stained, his face gaunt from fever and hunger, but he stood with as much dignity as he could muster. I am Alpha King Camden Floyd of the Palm Grove territories, he said, his voice rough but clear. I come seeking audience with your Alpha. I offer alliance against a common enemy. The sentries exchanged glances. One of them laughed. The great Camden Floyd running to his enemies for help? The world must be ending. It might be, Camden said flatly, if you don't take me to your Alpha immediately. Why should we? You've spent the last decade trying to conquer us. Yet your armies burned our villages, your soldiers killed our people. Give me one reason we shouldn't put an arrow through your throat right now. Camden felt his pride warring with desperation. Every instinct screamed at him to respond with authority, with threats, with the dominance that had always served him. But that hadn't saved him from Everly's betrayal. That hadn't stopped his entire court from celebrating his murder. He met the sentry's gaze and did something he'd never done in his life. He knelt. The ground was cold and hard against his knees. His wounds screamed protest, but he bowed his head and spoke words that tasted like ashes. I'm begging you, not as a king, as a man who's lost everything and has nowhere else to turn. Please, take me to your Alpha. Let me make my case. If you don't like what I have to say, you can execute me then. The silence that followed was absolute. The sentries stared at him like he'd grown a second head. An Alpha King didn't kneel, didn't beg, didn't show weakness. But Camden had learned in the past 3 days that pride was worthless when you were dying in a cave. That authority meant nothing when the people who should have been loyal were planning your funeral. That sometimes survival required doing the impossible. Sarai stepped forward, pulling out her leather journal. My name is Sarai Boyd, formerly of House Boyd. I was an intelligence gatherer for the Ghost Scribes. This journal contains 3 months of documented evidence proving that Lord Varric of the Palm Grove Pack orchestrated a coup against King Camden. And it also contains evidence that Varric plans to break the peace treaty and invade Blackwood territory within 6 months. She handed the journal to the lead sentry. If you don't help us, Varric will be the new ruler of Palm Grove, and he won't stop there. He's been planning to absorb all the neutral territories into his empire. We have letters, documented meetings, strategic plans. Everything you need to see that Camden Floyd isn't your enemy anymore. Varric is. The sentry opened the journal, scanning the pages. His expression shifted from skepticism to concern to alarm as he read. This could be fabricated. It could be, Sarai agreed. But ask yourself, why would Camden Floyd come here wounded, alone, begging for help if this was some elaborate trick? What would he gain? If he wanted to attack you, he'd come with an army, and not with a journal and an Omega Maid. The sentry looked at Camden, still kneeling in the dirt, then back at the journal. He made a decision. On your feet, Floyd. We're taking you to Alpha Marcus. But if this is a trick, you'll wish we'd killed you here. They were escorted through dense forest to a fortified settlement built into the mountainside. Blackwood warriors watched them pass with hostile eyes. Children threw rocks, women spat at Camden's feet. He couldn't blame them. He'd burned their villages, killed their people, been their enemy for years. Now he was begging to be their ally. Alpha Marcus Blackwood received them in a great hall carved from living rock. He was older than Camden expected, his hair more gray than black, his face lined with decades of warfare. He sat on a throne made from ancient oak and surrounded by his council. Camden Floyd, Marcus said, his voice like grinding stone. I never thought I'd see you in my hall, especially not looking like a half-dead refugee. I never thought I'd be here, Camden admitted. But circumstances change, alliances shift, and sometimes former enemies discover they have a common threat. Lord Varric. Yes, he orchestrated a coup against me, turned my wife, my general, my entire court. They were planning to execute me and install him as ruler. I barely escaped with my life. And you want us to help you reclaim your throne? Why would we do that? Sarai stepped forward. Because if you don't, Varric will come for you next. He sees the peace treaty as a weakness to exploit. He's already planning his invasion of neutral territories. And it's all documented here. She placed the journal on the table before Marcus. Camden Floyd may have been your enemy, but he honored treaties. He fought honorably. Varric doesn't know the meaning of honor. He'll use poison and assassination and treachery. He'll destroy everyone who stands between him and power. Marcus picked up the journal, began reading. The hall fell silent except for the turning of pages. Camden watched the Alpha's expression change as he absorbed the evidence, months of documentation, letters, strategic plans, all pointing to Varric's ambitions. Finally, Marcus looked up. This is extensive. If true, it's damning. It's true, Sarai said. I documented everything personally. The ghost scribes trained me to be thorough. The ghost scribes, Marcus repeated. I've heard of them, and thought they were a myth. We were real until Varric discovered us and had most of us killed. I'm one of the few survivors. Marcus studied them both. Camden standing with barely contained exhaustion, Sarai fierce and determined despite her ragged appearance. Then he leaned back in his throne. I'll be honest, Floyd. I hate you. You've cost me friends, territory, years of warfare. Every instinct says to throw you back to Varric and let him finish what he started. Camden's heart sank. They'd come all this way for nothing. But, Marcus continued, I hate Varric more. He's a snake who hides behind false diplomacy and manufactured evidence. I've dealt with him at treaty negotiations. I know his kind. And if what this journal says is true, he's a threat to everyone. He stood, moving to stand directly in front of Camden. Yet, so here's my offer. I'll give you an army. We'll march on your palace together, expose Varric's treachery, and help you reclaim your throne. But in return, you grant Blackwood territory full autonomy, representation in your council, and economic partnerships. No more war between us, ever. We become allies in truth, not just on paper. Camden met his gaze. A week ago, he would have refused. His pride wouldn't have allowed such concessions. But he'd learned hard lessons in the past few days about pride and power and what really mattered. Agreed, he said, extending his hand. Alliance. True alliance. Marcus clasped his hand. Then let's go take back your kingdom, and make Varric regret the day he thought he could play us all for fools. For the first time in days, Camden felt something stir in his chest. Hope. They had an army. That they had evidence. They had allies who should have been enemies. Varric thought he'd won. But the real game was just beginning. And this time, Camden Floyd wasn't playing by the old rules. Chapter 5, The King's Memorial. The city was draped in black. Mourning banners hung from every building, fluttering in the cold wind like dark wings. Citizens moved through the streets with heads bowed, wearing the traditional gray of grief. The entire capital had been transformed into a monument to Camden Floyd's death. Except Camden Floyd wasn't dead. He stood in the shadows of a servants' alley, watching his own funeral procession pass by. A golden casket carried on the shoulders of palace guards, the same guards who'd tried to kill him a week ago. Behind it walked Queen Everly in widow's black, her face a perfect mask of sorrow. Beside her, a Lord Varric played the role of supportive advisor, his hand respectfully on her elbow. "I look terrible in gold," Camden muttered. "Should have specified silver in my will." Sarai elbowed him. "This isn't funny. They're consolidating power while the city mourns. Varric's already moving his own people into key positions." They'd returned to the capital under cover of darkness, part of Alpha Marcus's plan. The Blackwood army was positioned 3 days outside the city, waiting for Camden's signal. But before they could march, they needed something crucial: support from within. "The servants will help us," Sarai said quietly. "They always see what the nobility misses, and they have no love for Varric." She'd spent the past 2 days moving through the servant networks, the invisible infrastructure that kept the palace running. At kitchen staff, stable hands, laundry workers, cleaners. The people who were beneath notice but who knew every secret, heard every conversation, saw every treachery. They'd gathered in the undercroft of an old temple, 50 servants who'd risked everything to attend this midnight meeting. Camden stood before them, no longer in crimson regalia, but in simple clothes that let him blend with their ranks. "I know what you're thinking," Camden said, his voice echoing in the stone chamber. "You're thinking I'm a fool who trusted the wrong people. You're thinking I deserved what happened because I was too busy with wars to notice my own palace rotting from within. And you're right." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't what they'd expected from a king. "I was blind, and I promoted people based on their status and connections rather than their character. I listened to advisors who told me what I wanted to hear instead of people who knew the truth. I signed execution orders without verifying evidence because I was too busy, too arrogant, too convinced of my own righteousness." He paused, meeting their eyes. "But I'm not that man anymore. What Varric did, what he's doing, it opened my eyes. The people who saved my life weren't nobles or generals. It was an Omega Maid who documented treachery while scrubbing floors. It was servants who knew the hidden passages and secret truths. It was the invisible ones who saw everything." Camden gestured to Sarai, who stepped forward with her journal. "This woman risked her life to warn me. She gathered evidence while you all watched and waited, wondering if anyone would listen. Well, I'm listening now." Martha, the head cook who Camden had barely acknowledged in 10 years of rule, stood up. "What do you want from us, Your Majesty? We're just servants. We have no armies, no weapons, no power." "You have something better," Camden said. "You have access. You serve their meals, clean their chambers, hear their conversations. You're in every room where decisions are made, and they don't even see you. That's not weakness. That's the ultimate advantage." He laid out the plan Sarai had helped him craft. The servants would continue their duties, but they'd be gathering intelligence. Who was loyal to Varric? Who had doubts? What were the security arrangements for the coronation ceremony planned for 3 days hence? Where were the guards positioned? What were the escape routes? "We're asking you to spy on the people who rule you," Sarai said. "It's dangerous. If you're caught, Varric won't show mercy. But if we do nothing, he'll crown himself king and rule with the same treachery he used to steal the throne. Your children will grow up in a kingdom where poison and betrayal are rewarded, where the only way to survive is to become invisible or become a monster." An old man in the back stood up. Camden recognized him vaguely, someone who maintained the palace gardens. "My son died in your wars, Your Majesty. Died fighting for your glory while you sat safe in the palace. Why should I help you now?" The question was fair, brutal, deserved. Camden could have deflected, could have made excuses. Instead, he met the man's gaze directly. "I can't give you back your son. I can't undo the mistakes I made. At the lives I wasted on campaigns that mattered less than I thought they did. All I can offer is the truth. I was wrong, and a promise. If you help me reclaim the throne, I will never again send soldiers to die without being absolutely certain the cause is worth their lives. Your son deserved better than me. You all deserve better than me. But right now, the choice isn't between me and someone better. It's between me and Varric. And I swear to you, I will spend the rest of my reign trying to become the king you should have had from the beginning." Silence. Then Martha stood again. I'll help. Not because I forgive you, but because I've seen Varric up close. Seen how he treats servants when nobles aren't watching. He's cruel when he doesn't need to be. Punishes people for his own amusement. At least you were just blind. He's malicious. Others stood, not all of them. Some walked out, unwilling to risk their lives for a king who'd failed them. But enough stayed. Enough to make this work. Over the next 2 days, they became Camden's eyes and ears throughout the palace. Information flowed through servant networks like water through underground streams, guard rotations, Varric's schedule, Everly's private meetings, the location of loyal soldiers versus traitors. Camden and Sarai operated from the undercroft, coordinating, planning, preparing for the moment when the Blackwood army would arrive. They slept in shifts, ate whatever the servants could smuggle to them, lived in the shadows of Camden's own capital like fugitives. On the second night, a young maid named Clara brought alarming news. They're moving up the coronation. Tomorrow at noon instead of 3 days from now. Varric says the kingdom needs stability. Can't wait for the traditional mourning period to end. He knows something, Sarai said immediately. Someone talked, or he's gotten intelligence about the Blackwood army. He's trying to legitimize his rule before we can act. Camden's mind raced. They weren't ready. The Blackwood forces were still 2 days out. They needed more time. Then we don't wait for the army, he said. We act tomorrow, during the coronation itself. That's suicide, Martha protested. The throne room will be filled with Varric's supporters, his guards, his allies. You'll be outnumbered 100 to 1. Numbers don't matter if we control the narrative, Camden said, an idea forming. Varric's claiming legitimacy through marriage to the grieving widow. But what if the widow is exposed as a conspirator? What if the entire court sees the evidence of their treachery? He turned to Sarai. Your journal, the letters, we present everything publicly during the ceremony itself. Force them to answer the charges in front of witnesses they can't silence or intimidate. They'll kill you the moment you step into that throne room. Not if I'm already dead. Camden smiled grimly. They're holding a coronation for my replacement. What if the king they murdered shows up to his own succession ceremony? The shock alone will buy us seconds, and seconds might be enough. Sarai stared at him. This is insane. Do you have a better plan? She didn't. None of them did. So they prepared for the impossible. The servants would position themselves throughout the throne room, serving wine, and arranging flowers, standing in corners being invisible. When Camden made his entrance, they'd move, creating chaos, blocking exits, preventing guards from reaching him immediately. It was desperate, reckless, their only chance. As dawn broke on the day of Varric's coronation, Camden stood in the undercroft and addressed the servants one final time. Whatever happens today, know this. You've already proven you're braver than most soldiers I've commanded. You're risking everything for a kingdom that's never properly valued you. After today, that changes. Win or lose, live or die, the world will know that the invisible ones were the ones who mattered most. Martha stepped forward and pressed something into his hand, a simple iron ring worn smooth with age. My husband's. He was a blacksmith, and died defending the palace during the northern raids. He always said true strength wasn't about power. It was about standing up when it cost you everything. She met Camden's gaze. Make it cost something good this time, Your Majesty. Camden slipped the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly. Then he walked toward the throne room, toward his own coronation, toward the moment where everything would be decided. Sarai walked beside him, carrying the journal that would condemn a queen and expose a traitor. Behind them, 50 servants took their positions. The real game was about to begin. Chapter 6. The Wisdom of Silence. The throne room had never looked more magnificent. Thousands of candles blazed, casting golden light on silk banners and polished marble. Every noble in the kingdom stood in their finest attire, bearing witness to history. At the altar before the throne, Queen Everly knelt in midnight blue silk beside Lord Varric in black and silver. Their hands joined as the high priest prepared to crown them joint rulers. Camden Floyd watched from the shadows of the high gallery, his heart hammering against his ribs. Below, servants moved through the crowd with wine and refreshments, invisible as always. Martha arranging flowers near the dais, Clara refilling goblets, Marcus positioning himself near the main doors, 50 pairs of eyes waiting for the signal. Last chance to reconsider this insanity, Sarai whispered beside him. I died once already this week, Camden replied. Doing it again seems redundant. The high priest raised his hands for silence. We gather today in sorrow and hope. Sorrow for the loss of Camden Floyd, and who served this kingdom with strength and valor. Hope for the future under the wise guidance of Queen Everly and her chosen consort, Lord Varick. Camden's fingers tightened on the gallery railing. Strength and valor. They were eulogizing him with the very qualities they'd exploited. If any here know why these two should not be crowned, speak now or— I object. Camden's voice rang out like a thunderclap. The throne room went absolutely silent. Every head turned, searching for the source. Camden stepped forward into the light, letting them see him fully, letting them see their dead king standing above them like a ghost returned to judgment. The reaction was instantaneous chaos. Gasps, screams, someone fainted. Guards drew weapons but froze, uncertain who to point them at. On the dais, Everly's face went white as corpse flesh, and Varick's hand moved to his sword. "Hello, wife," Camden said, his voice carrying to every corner. "I hope you're surprised to see me. I know I was surprised to overhear you celebrating my murder." "Guards!" Varick shouted. "That's an imposter! Seize him!" But Camden was already moving, descending the gallery stairs with Sarai at his side. The servants throughout the room shifted positions subtly, blocking guards' paths, creating obstacles, buying precious seconds. "An imposter?" Camden reached the main floor and walked steadily toward the dais. "Then how do I know about the scar on your left shoulder blade, Everly? The one you got falling from a horse when you were 12? How do I know about the secret meetings in your private study? The letters to Varick planning my assassination?" "Lies!" Everly found her voice. "You're mad! The king is dead." "The king was supposed to be dead," Camden corrected. "But someone warned me. Someone invisible, someone you never noticed because you were too busy plotting treason." He gestured to Sarai. "This is Sarai Boyd, formerly of House Boyd, which Varick destroyed 8 years ago with fabricated evidence. She's been documenting your conspiracy for 3 months. Every meeting, every letter, every treasonous word." Sarai stepped forward and held up the journal. "Should I start with June 3rd, when Varick first proposed the coup? Or June 15th, when General Thorne agreed to compile a list of loyal officers to be eliminated? Or perhaps we should read Queen Everly's letter describing how much she hates her husband and can't wait to be free of him?" "This is a bard," Varick snarled, drawing his sword. "Guards! Kill them both!" But the guards weren't moving. They were looking at each other, uncertain. Their king stood before them, wounded, bedraggled, but unmistakably alive. The man they'd been told to hunt. The man they'd been told died in his chambers. "General Thorne," Camden called out, "would you like to explain to these men why you told them I was dead when I was very much alive? Why you organized hunting parties to track me through the wilderness? Why you've been taking orders from Varick instead of your king?" Thorne stepped forward from the crowd, his hand on his sword. "Because your time is over, Camden. You're a relic, a warmonger who's bled this kingdom dry. We're ushering in a new era." "A new era of poisoned wine and assassinated rivals?" Camden shook his head. "How many of you nobles have sons and daughters? And ask yourselves, is this the kingdom you want them to inherit? One where the only way to survive is treachery? Where loyalty is punished and betrayal is rewarded?" He turned in a slow circle, addressing the entire room. "I was a bad king. I admit that freely. I trusted the wrong people. I ignored the ones who knew the truth. I let my pride blind me to the corruption festering in my own palace. But I'm here now, I'm listening now, and I'm offering you a choice." Camden pointed at Varick. "You can follow him, a man who destroys entire families for trade routes, who murders those who threaten his ambitions, who sees everyone as either a tool or a threat. Or you can give me a chance to become the king I should have been. The king who listens to servants as well as nobles, who values truth over flattery, and who understands that real power comes from earning loyalty, not demanding it." "Enough of this!" Varick lunged forward, his sword aimed at Camden's heart. Camden didn't have a weapon, didn't need one. Martha threw a serving tray that caught Varick in the knee. He stumbled. Clara tripped a guard who tried to assist him. Suddenly, servants throughout the room were moving, and the invisible became visible. Marcus threw open the throne room doors. "In the name of the Blackwood Alliance!" Soldiers in black and green poured through, not the main army, but an advance guard that had hidden in the city overnight. Alpha Marcus Blackwood himself strode in, his presence commanding immediate attention. "I speak for the neutral territories," Marcus announced. We have reviewed the evidence against Lord Varric and Queen Everly. We find it compelling, and documented, and damning. Camden Floyd may be flawed, but he is the lawful king, and we stand with him. The tide turned. Palace guards who'd been uncertain now moved against Varric's supporters. Nobles who'd been silent found their voices, denouncing the conspiracy. Thorne tried to fight but was overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Within minutes, it was over. Varric and Everly stood surrounded, their supporters either captured or fled. The coronation they'd planned became their trial. Camden approached Everly slowly. "Did you ever love me? Even in the beginning?" She met his gaze with defiance. "I loved what you could give me. Power, status, a throne. That's all marriage ever was. Then you'll die as you lived, alone with your ambition." He turned to the guards. "Take them to the dungeons. Now they'll stand trial for treason." As they were dragged away, Camden turned to face his kingdom, to face the nobles who'd supported the coup, the guards who'd hunted him, the people who'd believed him dead. "I am Camden Floyd. I am still your king, but I am not the same man who left this palace a week ago." He looked at the servants standing throughout the room. "These people saved my life. They risked everything when they had nothing to gain. They saw the truth when all of you chose blindness." He walked to Sarai and took her hand. "Sarai Boyd, you've proven yourself braver than any general, more loyal than any advisor, more worthy than any noble in this room. You documented treachery while scrubbing floors. You saved a king who once signed your family's death warrant. And you showed me that the eyes that see the most are often the ones we choose to ignore." Camden knelt before her, reversing their positions from a week ago. "I would be honored if you would stand beside me, not as a servant, not as an advisor, but as my queen." The throne room erupted in shocked whispers. Sarai stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "I didn't do it for a crown." "I know, that's exactly why you deserve one." He stood, still holding her hand. "What do you say? Will you help me build the kingdom we both want, where the invisible are finally seen?" Sarai looked at the servants standing throughout the room, at Martha with her iron ring, at Clara who'd risked execution to bring intelligence, at all the people who'd been beneath notice their entire lives. "Yes," she said. "Et on one condition, they come with us." She gestured to the servants, a council of the unheard, representatives from every level of society. No more decisions made by nobles who don't understand how their kingdom actually works. Camden smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time in a week. "Done." He turned to address the kingdom. "Let it be known throughout the realm. The age of Floyd continues, but it begins anew, with a queen who is invisible, with a council that hears all voices, with a promise that never again will we be blind to the truth simply because it comes from those we've ignored. High Priest, crown us both. Let the kingdom see that true power lies not in birth or status, but in loyalty, courage, and the wisdom to see what others miss." As the crowns were placed, one on Camden's head, and one on Sarai's, the throne room remained silent. Then Martha began to clap. Slowly, Clara joined her. Then the other servants. Then the Blackwood soldiers. Finally, reluctantly, the nobles followed. Camden Floyd had been a king who conquered territories. Now he would be a king who learned to listen. And beside him stood a queen who'd been a nobody, the Omega Maid who'd saved a kingdom by refusing to stay silent. The woman who proved that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is notice the people everyone else ignores. Subscribe, don't wait. If you love this story, you won't want to miss the upcoming ones filled with betrayal, redemption, and powerful twists. Comment, let me know your thoughts. What was your favorite moment? Share your feelings, and your comment could get featured in future episodes. Share. Send this story to one person who needs to hear it. Help us build a community that values real, meaningful content. Engagement is the fuel that drives the algorithm to distribute this story to more people who crave impactful storytelling. Every subscription, comment, and share helps us grow this movement and ensures the next story reaches a wider audience. Don't let this be the end. Take action now and join us for the next epic tale. Your throne awaits. Claim it.